What if the true measure of love isn't about holding on, but knowing when to let go? Welcome to Happiness of Love, your daily dose of K-dramas. Get ready to fall in love with unforgettable stories. Can you tell us where are you listening from? The laughter and applause echoed in Naomi Tanaka's mind as she stepped off the stage, where the audience had been captivated by her words on love and commitment. Yet, the thrill of success felt like a delusion, a distant melody overshadowed by the growing silence at home. Her recent book, Falling for Love Again, had skyrocketed her career, but as she smiled at the cameras flashing her way, the reality waiting for her behind the curtain cast a shadow over her glowing image. That evening, she sat down at an elegant dinner surrounded by eager colleagues who rallied around her, excitedly discussing her achievements, yet each bite of her gourmet meal tasted like ashes. When she brought up wedding plans with Daniel Nakamura, her fiancé of 7 years, the room stilled momentarily, and she noticed him staring into space, the edge of his mouth barely twitching into a polite smile. Discomfort tightened in her chest when Amy, her younger sister and the hopeless romantic of the family, leaned in to whisper that their relationship felt functional but lifeless. Naomi had laughed off the comment, desperately clinging to the illusion of happiness, but as the night wore on, her heart sank into a deeper unease. She caught Daniel's eye, hoping for reassurance, but the blank expression staring back felt like an unbridgeable chasm. Later that night, after the last of their guests had left and the elegant home they once cherished felt cold and sterile, Naomi attempted to broach the subject of their impending wedding. When Daniel deftly sidestepped her question and retreated to the couch, a wave of bitterness surged within her. The man she had once known, the one who could ignite passion with a single glance, seemed to have vanished entirely. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts whirled chaotically. Was this the pinnacle of her life's work, built at the expense of her own happiness? The morning sun filtered through the blinds, drawing Naomi to the kitchen, where she mechanically prepared coffee. Memories of laughter and spontaneous adventures danced like shadows in her mind, now tinged with a sharp ache of loneliness. Tuning out the noise of discontent drumming in her heart, she was oblivious to the storm brewing outside. It was during an interview with Kenji Saito, the sharp-eyed journalist who swept through her life like a whirlwind, that truth hit her with the force of a tidal wave. Naomi sat rigidly as Kenji, breaking from the script, abruptly asked about the swirling rumors concerning her and Daniel's possible separation. The question struck a nerve, twisting a knife of panic into her gut. Alarm bells rang in her mind. Could it be true? The thought of her reputation as a relationship therapist being compromised sent a jolt of urgency through her. It was mere gossip, she reasoned, but the truth lay bare before her, thicker than the polished veneer she cultivated for the world to see. As Kenji probed further, Naomi felt the walls closing in. If the facade cracked, what remained? Desperate to salvage her career and their relationship, she resolved in that fleeting moment to apply her own therapeutic wisdom. She was determined to save what felt like a sinking ship, but deep down, uncertainty gnawed at her and the question lingered, does a life built on appearances constitute real love? With every heartbeat, worried whispers grew louder, challenging who she was and who she had become. As the interview concluded, Naomi stood poised yet trembling, aware that her polished brand was teetering on the edge of revelation, caught between the love she had been preaching and a relationship on the brink of collapse. Determined to prevent a scandal that could ruin her career, Naomi Tanaka took a deep breath and suggested couples therapy to Daniel. She had always advised her clients to seek help and now found herself proposing the same strategy to the man with whom she had spent the last 7 years. Daniel hesitated, his brow furrowing as he considered the implications of such a move. He ultimately agreed, not out of any strong belief in the process but rather as a gesture of support for Naomi's career. Though it was a relief to have him on board, Naomi could sense his reluctance, an unspoken wall that only grew higher with each passing moment. The therapy sessions quickly devolved into chaos. Naomi, eager to infuse her professional expertise into the personal realm, attempted to guide the discussions with all the finesse of a practiced therapist. She spoke with enthusiasm, her words brimming with the confident authority she wielded in her work, as if directing a play where she already knew the ending. We need to communicate more openly, she insisted, her eyes searching Daniel's for a spark of engagement that he didn't reciprocate. Instead, he regarded her with a cold indifference that felt like ice water spilling into her passionate hopes, leaving her heart heavy with disappointment. The sessions felt less like a healing process and more like a futile exercise, as Daniel often retreated into silence or deflected her attempts at intimacy with one-word answers or dismissive shrugs. Work did little to alleviate the mounting pressure. Margaret Ito, her demanding boss, called her into her office, where the sterile air was thick with the weight of unspoken expectations. You must maintain your public image, Naomi, Margaret stated bluntly, her tone brooking no argument, as she emphasized the importance of presenting a picture-perfect existence to the world. Naomi nodded, her smile wavering, realizing that the facade she had built was crumbling beneath her feet, but Margaret's warning felt more like a tightrope act than a lifeline. In a desperate bid to escape the suffocating atmosphere, Naomi found solace at her younger sister Amy's cafe, where the intoxicating aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet scent of pastries. The cafe buzzed with light-hearted conversations, laughter spilling over like the froth atop the cappuccino cups. Here, Naomi could momentarily forget the turmoil brewing in her life. Amy would often tease her, asking about her latest relationship strategies, her eyes sparkling with mischief as she recounted the love stories of her own customers, igniting Naomi's own yearning for genuine connection that seemed farther away with each day. As the crisis in her relationship deepened, Naomi found herself drawn into a web of introspection, all while Kenji Saito, the sharp-eyed journalist, continued his investigation into her personal life. In a particularly probing moment, he had remarked, "Do you think that saving a relationship is the same as preserving an illusion?" The question haunted Naomi long after their conversation ended, swirling in her mind like autumn leaves caught in an invisible current. She threw herself into her work, speaking engagements, and adeptly guiding her clients through their relationship woes, all while fighting the gnawing doubt that her own foundation was a mere facade. In therapy sessions, she felt increasingly like an actor playing a part rather than someone living in her own reality, her own lessons echoing painfully as she struggled to align her life with the ideals she so fervently taught others. Naomi fought against the fear, adamant in her refusal to admit that her love story might already be unraveling, even as the threads of her relationship with Daniel continued to slip through her fingers, each day bringing them further apart. Naomi's heart raced with every attempt she made to breathe life into her relationship with Daniel. The sumptuous dinners she prepared, fragrant with herbs and spices, felt like mere theatrics, designed only to mask the underlying tension that had silently wound its way into their home like an unwelcome guest. She carefully arranged flowers at the table, lighting flickering candles that cast a warm glow across the faded memories etched in the walls. Each attempt at romance hung in the air like a fragile ornament, ready to shatter at the slightest breath. Daniel, seated across from her, offered only polite smiles and distant glances, his attention clearly lost in thoughts that swirled outside their shared reality. Naomi felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken words pressing down on her, making the atmosphere between them even heavier, a chasm filled with everything left unsaid. Despite her cheerful demeanor, an unsettling instinct began to whisper in her ear that something was fundamentally wrong. As the mundane days slipped by, she noticed subtleties in Daniel's behavior. He seemed preoccupied, his laughter dulled, his responses curt. Hours melded into rituals of silence followed by obligatory discussions about work, leaving Naomi more isolated in their union. Strains of doubt coiled around her heart, and curiosity turned into an insistent ache, prompting her to brim with anxiety. One evening, returning home later than usual after attending a seminar, she found Daniel seated in the living room, his silhouette outlined against the dim light of the television. The flickering images danced across his face, but his eyes seemed fixated on thoughts far removed from their shared space. As she glanced at his phone, resting carelessly on the coffee table, a sense of trepidation crept in. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown contact. Naively, she picked it up, but her pulse quickened exponentially as she read the initial of the name, H.K. It was no ordinary name, echoing in her mind like a haunting melody. Overcome with silent dread, she couldn't help but scroll through his call history, each entry amplifying the gnawing anxiety festering inside. The name appeared repeatedly, a maddening echo, whispering secrets that felt too potent to ignore. She could feel the familiar ache of betrayal clawing at her chest, a feeling she had long buried under layers of denial and pretense. Before confronting him, she sought solace in the comforting embrace of her younger sister Amy, whose romantic ideals often seemed like a balm to her troubles. That day, Naomi met Amy at the cafe, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirled around them, a mixture of comfort and sweetness that momentarily masked her turmoil. She confided in her sister, who leaned in, her bright eyes sparkling with a blend of mischief and concern as she confidently declared that confrontation was the only way forward. "You deserve to hear the truth, Naomi," she declared emphatically, fueled by the conviction that their love story could still be salvaged. Summoning courage, Naomi returned home that evening, where Daniel sat absently scrolling through his phone, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within her. Gathering her thoughts, she took a deep breath and confronted him, cautious yet unwavering. "Who is H.K.?" she asked, her voice trembling but firm. The air thickened with tension as his eyes darted to meet hers, revealing surprise that morphed swiftly into apprehension. After a prolonged silence, he fumbled for words, finally admitting that he had been considering a tempting job offer out of state, a prospect he had deemed too weighty to share, fearing that it might disrupt their already fragile equilibrium. This confession struck Naomi like a lightning bolt, igniting a kaleidoscope of emotions: betrayal, shock, and a profound realization that surged through her. For the first time, she understood that the roots of their struggles ran deeper than just the absence of romance or connection. They had grown apart, drifting silently into separate realms without a clear purpose to hold them together. The realization that they had been living parallel lives, once intertwined, now bordered on the brink of disunion, loomed over her like a specter, a weight too heavy to bear. In that moment, Naomi felt a bittersweet surge of enlightenment wash over her, eclipsing her prior frustrations. As she gazed into the distance, surrounded by the remnants of their shared life, the uncomfortable truth simmered in her heart, demanding to be acknowledged amid the echoes of lost love. Naomi, with her usual intensity, attempted to open a genuine conversation with Daniel, hoping this would mark a shift in their increasingly hollow exchanges. She set the scene with candlelight and soft music, a juxtaposition to the tension that had long settled between them. As she began to voice her feelings, all the thoughts she had bottled up spilling forth, Daniel's demeanor shifted from distant to defensive. His words came out sharp and hurtful as he rejected her attempts, claiming that he had repeatedly tried to broach this topic only to be met with her indifference. Naomi, feeling her heart constrict with guilt, pondered whether she had prioritized the pristine image of their relationship over nurturing their actual happiness together. It felt hard to confront the truth that beneath their public facade lay a crumbling connection, one that had become functional yet lifeless, which was what her sister Amy had pointed out. At this realization, Naomi's heart sank. Perhaps her life as a renowned relationship therapist, giving advice to others about love and commitment, had become a veil over her own neglected fears and desires. The gala event was a flurry of elegant dresses, clinking glasses, and bright lights, a perfect backdrop for the whirlwind of emotions swirling in her chest. Naomi moved through the crowd, exchanging polite smiles with colleagues and nodding to familiar faces, yet, she felt the weight of her realizations grounding her, isolating her amidst the seemingly buoyant atmosphere. It was during this moment of both introspection and distraction that she unexpectedly came face to face with Kenji Saito, the journalist who had become her inadvertent confidant. He stepped closer, his gaze piercing with an intensity that made her stomach twist with discomfort and curiosity. Without preamble, he leaned in slightly and posed a question that struck her as more of a challenge than anything else. He asked that if she were her own patient, what would she tell herself? Naomi felt the question reverberate through her, the irony painfully evident as it pricked the bubble of her carefully curated life. The very audacity of his inquiry stirred something within her, forcing her to confront the truth that had been hiding beneath layers of pretense. As the night unfolded, Naomi stole glances at Daniel, who was across the venue, sharing laughter with a female colleague in a way she hadn't seen in months. There was an ease between them, and rather than the pang of jealousy she had anticipated, a surprising wave of relief washed over her. The realization hit her hard. For the first time, she began to genuinely consider the notion that maybe, just maybe, their love had indeed run its course. Perhaps love did not always align neatly into the narrative she had crafted for herself, and this new perspective was both liberating and terrifying. She watched as Daniel engaged in animated discussion, his once closed-off demeanor softening as he interacted with someone new, and in that moment, everything felt strangely clear. Their relationship, once the poster child for connection and understanding, had become a performance, an obligatory dance of appearances that neither of them genuinely enjoyed. The evening laughter in the hall began to echo her resolve, suggesting that sometimes moving forward meant relinquishing the weight of past attachments and forging a new path, even without the maps she once relied upon. Naomi realized that acknowledging her truths was the first stride toward reclaiming her lost sense of self, and whatever lay ahead could be a door to new beginnings, whether those involved romance or solitude. Naomi felt as though she were drifting away from herself, each day blending into the next as she filled every hour with work, desperately trying to drown out the silence that had settled between her and Daniel. With each new client she took on and every speaking engagement that appeared on her calendar, she could almost convince herself that everything was fine, that the cracks in her engagement were nothing more than mere cosmetic flaws. But deep down, she was aware of a growing sense of emptiness, like a shadow lurking in the corners of her mind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the cafe lights twinkled like scattered stars, she found herself at Amy's cafe, mindlessly stirring her coffee. The rich aroma wrapped around her, momentarily comforting, yet the weight of her thoughts kept pulling her back into loneliness. It was then that Kenji walked in, his sharp gaze cutting through the ambient noise of the cafe. Without waiting for an invitation, he perched across from her, an inquisitive look in his eyes that made her suddenly self-conscious. He studied her with an intensity that felt both unnerving and strangely refreshing. "Still pretending everything's fine?" he asked, the corner of his mouth quirking up in a half-tease, half-serious challenge. Naomi bristled at the comment, feeling exposed under his scrutiny, yet she didn't refute his words. Instead, she leaned back, reluctant to reveal the truth even as her facade began to crack under his observation. Kenji had a knack for piercing through her professional armor, pushing her to confront the gnawing fear that loomed over her. It wasn't losing Daniel that terrified her, but the possibility of admitting she had failed in the relationship she had invested so much of herself in. The tension in the air was palpable as they shared thoughts over coffee, Kenji's candid remarks resonating in her mind long after she left the cafe. That night, she curled up in her bed, but sleep refused to come easily. Her dreams took her back to the early days with Daniel, scenes playing out like a nostalgic movie reel, their late-night ramen dinners filled with laughter, the way he effortlessly pulled her into his arms when she was overcome with stress, wrapping her in warmth that felt like her safe haven. But as she stirred awake, the harsh light of reality brought with it a painful realization. The warmth she once cherished had faded into a distant memory, overshadowed by the coldness of their current existence. As the morning light filtered into her apartment, there was a tension that weighed heavily in the air. At work, Margaret Ito, her boss and the unwavering epitome of professionalism, cornered her to discuss the upcoming live interview scheduled in just a week. "You'll be sharing your insights on how to make love last," she reminded Naomi, her tone emphasizing the importance of maintaining her public persona. The irony wasn't lost on Naomi, who felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Here she was, an expert in relationships, yet her personal life was a shipwreck. She wondered how much longer she could pretend that everything was alright when her heart had become a battlefield. In that moment of clarity, Naomi contemplated her circumstances, bleak and complicated, and felt a flicker of desperation. The facade of a picture-perfect life had begun to crumble, and she was scared to look at the reality that lay beneath. Daniel, sensing the emotional distance that had grown between him and Naomi, finally mustered the courage to ask her directly about their commitment. He said that the question had been weighing heavily on him. "Are we still trying?" Naomi felt the gravity of his words seep into her very soul, catching her off guard as memories of their earlier days flooded her mind. She wanted to respond affirmatively, to assure him that they could still fight for what they once had, yet the words seemed trapped in her throat. The silence hung between them, thick and uncomfortable, until she diverted her unease into a practical response, suggesting a weekend getaway. It was one last attempt to rekindle the fading flames of their love. They packed their bags with a mix of hope and reluctance, heading to a quiet beachside that echoed with the laughter of happier times, a place where they had once celebrated milestones in their relationship. As they arrived, the salty breeze kissed their skin, and the sound of crashing waves provided a nostalgic soundtrack for their hearts. The once vibrant colors of their relationship began to color their surroundings as they walked along the shore, hand in hand, the sand soft beneath their feet. They reminisced about shared moments, their first anniversary, the stolen kisses, and the warmth of each other's laughter. For the first time in weeks, they found themselves laughing, the sound ringing out across the beach like healing music. Naomi felt lighter, as if the water could wash away the burdens they were carrying. Yet, as night fell, the invigorating air turned heavy, drawing out the unspoken truths that lurked beneath the surface of their shared history. During a candlelit dinner beneath a sky sprinkled with stars, Naomi decided to take a step into the uncomfortable terrain of vulnerability. She confessed that she no longer knew if she loved him the way she used to, her voice trembling slightly as the honesty poured from her heart. The food, once delightful, now seemed irrelevant as the atmosphere thickened with an impending revelation. Daniel, after what felt like an eternity of silence, finally responded, his gaze dropping. He admitted that he had been feeling the same way for years, trapped in an unending cycle of self-imposed obligation. He had stayed in the relationship not out of love, but out of a fear of being the one to break it. It was a painful, raw moment, one that stripped away the facades they had both clung to for so long, leaving only the stark and frightful honesty that often accompanies a deep, shared struggle. The darkness enveloped them, with only the gentle light of the candles flickering between their words, illuminating their faces as they sat across from each other. It was a moment that felt simultaneously liberating and devastating, like standing on the edge of a precipice, poised to leap into the unknown. They were finally being honest with each other, yet the truth felt like a shackle, binding them instead of freeing them. When the meal concluded, heavy with what had been shared and unsaid, they returned to their small, rented room. The next morning dawned gray and misty, the sun hiding behind clouds that mirrored their somber mood. As they drove back in silence, the weight of their conversation settled heavily in the air between them. Each passing mile felt like they were moving towards a decision that could either mend their broken relationship or end it altogether. Naomi stole glances at Daniel, whose face was lined with contemplation, knowing that upon their return home, they would have to confront the reality of their intertwined lives and decide whether to keep holding onto the threads of a life that once felt full or finally let go, allowing each other the chance to find the love they truly deserved, even if it meant stepping apart. The week leading up to Naomi's live interview feels like a tightening noose around her neck, suffocating and relentless. Each time she rehearses her talking points, her own words echo back to her, hollow and insincere, as if they belong to someone else entirely. She's supposed to be the embodiment of love's wisdom, a guardian of romance, yet she finds herself on the brink of walking away from a 7-year engagement that feels more like a facade than a foundation. Her sister, Amy, with her keen intuition, senses the turmoil bubbling beneath the polished surface of Naomi's public persona. "You need to talk to someone who isn't Daniel," Amy insists, her voice threading through Naomi's thoughts like a lifeline. "Someone who can give you perspective." With hesitance gnawing at her resolve, Naomi agrees and decides to visit Mrs. Yoshida, her elderly patient, who has seen countless seasons of love and heartache over her 50-plus years of marriage. Expecting to gather nuggets of wisdom about fighting for love, Naomi walks into the cozy little apartment filled with the scent of herbal tea and an air of warmth. Mrs. Yoshida greets her with a knowing smile, devoid of judgment, yet rich with understanding. The words that come from her lips shock Naomi, rippling through her like a wave crashing against the shore. "The hardest part of love isn't staying, it's knowing when it's time to go," Mrs. Yoshida articulates with a gentle gravitas, her eyes piercing through the fabric of Naomi's guarding heart. Those words strike deep, echoing in Naomi's mind long after her visit ends, creating a chorus that distracts her during her nightly routine. That night, Naomi stands in front of her mirror, her reflection appearing like a stranger weary from countless battles fought in silence. Practicing lines meant to capture the essence of everlasting love, she finds herself unable to escape Mrs. Yoshida's poignant perspective. The air is thick, her own face staring back at her becomes an accusatory reminder of the reality she has been avoiding. The day of the interview arrives, and as Naomi walks into the bright studio, the smell of fresh flowers mingles with the stark scent of studio lights. It's enough to bring her senses to attention, yet nothing can prepare her for what lies ahead. Sweating beneath the bright studio lights, she takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of her heart as the cameras start rolling, the red light blinking like a beacon of truth. In that moment, something shifts within her. Instead of delivering a rehearsed speech about keeping love alive like an artist painting a perfect portrait, she channels something more genuine, more raw. Sometimes, she begins, her voice steady and profound, "Love doesn't last forever. And that's okay." The studio falls into a heavy silence, the shock evident through the stillness palpable in the air. The interviewer blinks in surprise, caught off guard by Naomi's unexpected honesty. Somewhere in the city, in an apartment filled with quiet tension, Daniel watches the broadcast, his heart echoing with a mix of understanding and a touch of sadness, comprehending exactly what his fiancée means and the reality they've both been avoiding for too long. After the interview, Naomi stands in her living room, her phone buzzing incessantly on the coffee table, a cacophony of notifications cascading around her like the chaotic thoughts racing through her mind. Some messages praise her fearless honesty, each compliment imbued with a sense of admiration that she briefly savors, while others arrive like daggers, accusing her of abandoning the very principles she has spent her life preaching. The contrast is stark, a reminder of the complexity of her public persona versus the tumultuous reality she faces behind closed doors. Margaret's voice echoes in her head as she recalls her boss's fiery warning about the potential fallout from her candor, a heavy burden that seemed to press down on her chest. Yet for the first time in years, Naomi feels a strange sense of liberation. She has spoken her truth, and it resonates within her like a long-hidden melody finally being played. Walking through the door of her apartment, she finds Daniel waiting, a figure she has known intimately yet felt increasingly estranged from. Their eyes meet, and instead of the heated conflict that usually looms over them, they share a moment of quiet acceptance, an unspoken acknowledgement of the shift between them. "We should talk," Daniel says simply, his tone laden with the weight of their history, and Naomi nods, feeling the gravity of the situation settle between them. They sit together on the couch, an unlikely oasis of calm enveloping them amidst the storm of their emotions. The air is thick with unsaid words, the silence marked only by their steady breath, each inhalation a reminder of the years they've built their lives around one another. It becomes painfully clear that their relationship has run its course, the realization settling in like an unwelcome guest that neither had the strength to dismiss. Tears escape Naomi's eyes, each drop a mix of sadness and relief, a cathartic release of years of unexpressed burdens that had woven themselves into the fabric of their lives. Daniel's expression mirrors her turmoil. His shoulders slump slightly as acknowledgement flows between them, reshaping the very foundation of what they once believed love to be. Yet amidst their grief, an unexpected lightness begins to emerge, as if they are shedding a layer of pretense that had made their bond feel suffocating. Later that night, Naomi lies in their bed, the sheets cold against her skin as she stares into the darkness. The silence in the apartment, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, now feels expansive, echoing with the reality that this will be one of the last nights she spends in the home they built together. As she contemplates the bittersweet sadness of what they are leaving behind, her heart beats in a rhythm of hope. Perhaps the space created by their separation could allow her to rediscover herself. The morning sunlight creeps in through the window, illuminating rooms now shrouded in uncertainty, and as Naomi stands in the midst of their shared life, she begins packing. Each item she folds into boxes seems to carry a story, a memory of their laughter, their dreams, and ultimately, their dilemmas. She catches herself hesitating as she picks up a plush blanket Daniel had draped over the couch last winter, the fabric soft against her fingertips, an embodiment of comfort and familiarity that once soothed her but now feels like a reminder of chains holding her to a life she no longer wishes to uphold. With resolve, she sets it aside, acknowledging that she must let go of what is no longer hers to carry. In that moment, surrounded by remnants of their shared past, Naomi embraces the daunting journey ahead, for she no longer seeks to be bound by an illusion, but instead to step boldly into her own truth, ready to discover what awaits beyond the pain of parting. Naomi moved into a small apartment near Amy's cafe, a cozy space adorned with minimalist decor and warm-toned lighting that seemed to breathe life into her newly independent existence. The first few days felt strange and disorienting, the silence ringing in her ears like an unanswered question echoing back at her. She would often find herself instinctively reaching for her phone, fingers lingering above the screen as memories of Daniel flooded her mind. Each swipe was a reminder that the long queues of polite text messages had vanished, leaving her to grapple with the stark reality of solitude. Yet as days turned into weeks, the unrelenting quiet began to shift. It transformed from a disconcerting presence into a canvas on which Naomi could paint the vibrant colors of rediscovery. She took pleasure in her old hobbies, immersing herself in knitting, a pastime that felt oddly soothing as she watched the strands of yarn intertwine just as she was learning to weave together the fragments of her new life. Naomi spent more time at Amy's cafe, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, wrapping around her like a warm hug, encouraging laughter and heartfelt conversations. During one such afternoon, as the cafe bustled with patrons savoring pastries, she found herself taking on a pro bono case at the clinic, helping women navigating their own heartbreaks and inviting her to reassess the depth of her own emotional scars. Each story shared over coffee was a mirror reflecting her journey, a balm that gradually healed the raw edges of her past heartache. One day, as she pored over case files at the cafe, she unexpectedly ran into Kenji, who approached her with a grin, his presence as surprising as it was reassuring. "So, Dr. Love finally taking your own advice?" he teased, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Naomi rolled her eyes but couldn't help the laughter that bubbled up, genuine and refreshing in its sincerity. Their banter flowed effortlessly, as they strolled together under the vibrant shades of sunset, a sense of camaraderie blossoming in their conversation. Kenji mentioned a new investigative piece he was working on, his passion illuminating the shadows that had lingered in her heart. For the first time, she listened with genuine interest, captivated not just by the story but by the earnestness of his spirit. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of lavender and orange, a warmth unfurled inside Naomi, a hope that had long been dormant began to stir. Later that night, she settled into the corner of her new apartment, clutching a glass of rich red wine that captured the essence of the evening within its depth. As she gazed out of the window, the city lights twinkled like stars sprinkled across a velvet sky. She reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The worry lines in her forehead softened, and she smiled at the thought of all the potential that lay ahead. She wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in years, she no longer feared the uncertainty. Instead, she embraced it, knowing that this chapter of her life was hers to write. In that moment of clarity, she breathed deeply, savoring the taste of the wine against her lips, intertwining her breath with liberated thoughts, promising herself that she would seek joy, whether it lay in self-exploration or unexpected companionship. With that promise, Naomi felt a softness settle around her heart, a tender reassurance whispering that her journey was just beginning. In that moment of clarity, as laughter and heartfelt conversations filled the event hall, Naomi felt an unfamiliar lightness settle in her chest. Kenji's presence was magnetic, his easy banter weaving a comfortable familiarity that had blossomed into something much deeper since their initial interactions. As they stood leaning against the bar, she spoke openly about her new project, sharing how empowering it felt to cultivate self-love and help others find their own happiness. Kenji listened intently, his gaze unwavering, absorbing her words as if they were the finest revelations. "You've come so far," he said, a proud smile gracing his lips. Energized by their connection, Naomi found herself wondering if this was merely a fleeting moment of companionship or the budding of something more meaningful. The evening progressed, and as they wandered amongst the guests, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that destiny had brought them together at this precise moment. With her heart racing, she recalled the dreams she once had, the aspirations forgotten in the haze of a faltering relationship. Kenji's laughter, rich and genuine, amplified her emotions, drawing her further away from the shadows of her past. Questions pulsated in her mind. Was he the one to help her rediscover the essence of love she once viewed with skepticism? Later, while they strolled through the twinkling city streets, the moon illuminated their unspoken bond. Kenji's hands casually brushed against hers as they exchanged stories, revealing the dreams and scars each had carried alone. When he stopped mid-sentence and turned to her, something shifted in the air, a charged electricity that brought all of Naomi's long-hidden hopes to the surface. "Naomi," he began, an intensity resting in his voice, "what if every ending was just a setup for a new beginning?" Before she could respond, a text notification illuminated her phone, a message from Daniel wishing her success and happiness. Naomi's breath caught as she processed the weight of their shared history, but a new chapter beckoned insistently, its promise intoxicating. "I don't want to go back," Naomi whispered almost to herself, realizing that the old narratives no longer defined her. In that instance, everything clicked, the clarity and resolution she had long sought. Kenji smiled knowingly, sensing her revelation. "Then embrace the unknown," he said, as if daring her to take the plunge into the vast and exhilarating possibilities of life ahead. As the night deepened, Naomi's laughter echoed in the distance, mingling with the vibrant city sounds, and in that moment of spontaneous joy, she felt the weight of her former life lift. It was as if the universe had shifted, aligning with her newfound understanding that love was not merely about the past but about creating tomorrows filled with hope and adventure. While the intricate tapestry of her life had momentarily paused at this crossroads, Naomi knew her story was far from over. The possibilities spiraled in every direction, hinting at unforeseen changes yet to come, and she stepped forward into the unknown, armed with the strength of her self-discovery and the warmth of a burgeoning connection. Just then, as the cool night air wrapped around her like a gentle embrace, Naomi caught Kenji's gaze, a moment suspended in time, filled with questions yet to be asked and dreams yet to be unveiled. The unscripted future stretched before her like an open book, ripe with potential, ready to be filled with new stories of love, laughter, and perhaps even a happily ever after, beckoning her to turn the first page. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Happiness of Love. That way, you won't miss any of our heartfelt romances. See you in the next love story.